Welcome to the 12th South-South Forum for Sustainability. This year, the main theme is green and sustainability. Today, now is the last but a great section, the ninth section. The theme is theoretical reflections on cultural sustainability. My name is Jadi Xue. I'm Associate Professor of Southwest University in Chongqing, China, and I'm also one of founding members of the Global University for Sustainability. And let me introduce the moderator of today's sections, Professor Teng Wei. She is Professor of College of Chinese Literature of South China Normal University and the Center for Contemporary Culture Studies at the South China Normal University in China.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yes. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Professor Teng Wei, the floor is yours.
Dear guests, teachers, and friends, good evening, everyone. I'm Teng Wei from Guangzhou, China, South Normal University, the moderator of the last discussion group of this session, this forum. I think although we have had several days of meetings, discussions, and visitings, all of you may have a little tired, but I believe that tonight's roundtables discussion will reignite the sparks of thought among us with the wonderful speeches and the guests will bring. So without further lecture, let's officially start our group's discussion. We have 5 speakers in this section, each with a time of 10 to 15 minutes. I will remind you at the 12 minutes. The first speaker is Professor Dai Jinhua from Peking University. 戴老师 it's your turn.
So this is the first time I couldn't make the conference, and I couldn't join online. So I don't, so I will just go directly to my sharing. So I don't know what has been discussed in the previous 3 days conference. So I will just follow my own thread. So we don't have to be like to create a fake optimism. My own feeling is that the world we are in is in a very extreme, cruel, destructive situations. And in a global international political landscape, I also see a deteriorating situation. For example, Trump's right-wing populism, the international trade wars, and also I also I also read a lot of news to check on the domestic politics in the United States. And you can tell that in the US, Trump is trying to bring the USA back to the 20th centuries, early 20th centuries, especially during the 20th century. All the domestic politics, and considering the hegemony situations in US, and all the domestic changes in the States must have affected, influenced all the leaders in the global level. Is creating a ripple effect in the world. Like the US government is claiming that all the white men, they are the victims. and all the non-Western, non-white, non-colonial, if they are facing again different kind of oppressions and discriminations. And I don't have to repeat all this and all the wars, regional wars, like from between Russia, Ukraine, Palestine, Israel, and all the proxy wars, and all the wars, they are all proxy wars. What are behind all the wars are all the countries, all the strong countries, and let alone, as you know, all the technological revolutions, the artificial intelligence disruption, guided by or directed by capitalism, and the increasing rates in unemployment, economic downturn, and in different parts of the world, we are facing extreme weather and ecological degradations, different disasters. And they are, they're real disasters like earthquake, tsunami, volcanic eruptions, flooding, drought. In different parts of the world, they are creating food safety issues, even famine, and unprecedented disasters. And I've observed that after COVID, we are facing a global disintegration. And after a rapid globalization, we are facing a global disintegration. We used to mobilize ourselves in the banner of anti-globalization and to face the homogenized capitalist nations. And so, where's our new banner facing this context of global disintegration? Where is our standing point? Where is our connections? Where is our new goal? How could we set that? It seems we have to ask a new question. How could we define ourselves? Are we still in a class basic?
How do we
or we are the marginalized, or we are the oppressed? So who is the oppressors?
marginalized group? The oppressed, and who are the oppressing? Where is our outlet? What is our way out of the fight against the solution? All of these questions are very urgent. So I want to repeat more. I have said many times that in face of this deterioration, we need to be brave and to recognize to certain levels we haven't gained a way to fight enough preparation, enough knowledge to fight against or to respond to this world. We don't have the weapons. So I think this is one of the starting points for us to restart. At the same time, when we are saying that the majority of the human beings once again is dragged into a war for survival, how can we fight? How can we defend
the marginalized, the vulnerable group, their right to live, and how can we make our fight possible? How can we make our fight effective? Are the core of the whole series of questions that we are facing now. I often, and I'm always insisting on and always believe in that 20th century still offers us in lots of legacies for our actions, for our thoughts. Our very important spiritual legacy lies on the 20th century. They can offer us provide with us the courage to face the 21st century. But how to activate the legacy from the 20th century? How do we invite in the new meanings and new meanings to the 20th century's spiritual legacy is one of the points that I have been observing and contemplating. After the bad news, here comes the good news. I want to share with us, when I am engaging with the youth of China, I want to share with us the hope that I gained with them from the observation of the youth culture. In 30 to 40 years, we have this kind of culture of the successful people and also the competition. Among the Chinese subculture, especially among the youth, the pop culture, when there is such this kind of logic of loser has vanished. In this kind of logic of ethic, this very strong ethic logic in the mainstream Chinese mainstream culture, we can see the resurrection of this kind of logic. But also at the same time, we can see some memory from the revolutionary era among the youth. It is silent, but more and more visible. It's a trajectory that we can see more and more clearly. Now we are in face of a struggle for survival. Those people who has been deprived of the right to survive, for them, when they are fighting for existence in this kind of reality, they are trying to create their own resources. It doesn't go through a certain motivation organization, but it has vanished in these kind of very severe living conditions. In order to win a future, they go back to the history. So now we can see more and more clear this kind of this kind of trajectory. I am trying to find a hope. We can see that the civilian society has replaced the disciplined society. We should try to go to the youth, not to enlighten them, to lead them, but to follow them, to recognize them, and to share with them. So we might be able to find certain hope in the fight for survival. Thank you.
Professor Dai has participated in every South Forum and delivered excellent speeches in each session. So I'm sure everyone here is quite familiar with Professor Dai. Thank you again for providing us with new sites. I would like to summarize all the panelists' speeches at the last. So now let's welcome the next speaker is Professor Philos Menji, who teaching in Carleton University, Canada now. Professor Philos?
Hi.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you. I was not expecting to be the first to be called, but first of all, to say thank you for inviting me. Thank you for organizing all these amazing seminars. A big congratulations to you, and really an honor to be with you today. What I want to try and address is the issue of culture and resistance in a time of genocide, mass killings, and the destruction of the environment, indeed, and particularly to focus on Palestine, which is, I feel, sometimes is not given the sufficient attention that it deserves. And if we're looking at it from a perspective of culture, I think all of you know of the genocidal actions of the Zionist Israeli state. But it's no accident that the genocidal attack began with a systematic destruction of universities, schools, colleges, cultural institutions, religious institutions, museums, archives of Palestinians, and so on. And this approach also continues in terms of the targeted killing of those people who are central to survival of Palestinians. One is, of course, the health workers, those journalists who get massacred, but also, most importantly, the systematic targeting of young people. This is to eliminate the future. And if culture is about anything, it isn't just about the past, it is about the future. And killing children is a fundamental feature of the elimination of culture. And as Amilcar Cabral, the Guinea-Bissau revolutionary, pointed out, whatever the material aspects of domination, it can be maintained only by the permanent and organized repression of cultural life of the people concerned. This is a process of dehumanization, which is required if you're going to have a colonial venture, settler colonial venture, which must depend on destroying and existing culture, languages, histories, and replacing those by their morality, by their culture. And I think this is a key aspect. I think that the Palestinian struggles have revealed two dimensions of culture: the culture of those engaged in resistance, those who are engaged in a struggle to reassert and reinvent what it means to be human, and those on the other side. And this is not just the Israelis. This is actually a US war. And supported by the Europeans and other settler states. And I think that's the crucial issue here, is that the struggle is one of asserting your humanity. It's really absolutely fascinating to see both emerging from within Gaza. And we have had several books come sent to us from Gaza, from people who are in the rubble and still producing cultural output in terms of music, song, poetry, stories, art, weaving, book, food. And this has happened internationally as well. I've never known previously such fascination and such interest in Palestinian poetry, Palestinian food, Palestinian writings. I mean, the internet is replete with these kind of things. So it's really interesting. The struggle in Gaza, in Palestine, is really focused on reclaiming their humanity and to show what it means to be human. And that has really had a huge impact internationally, especially for young people who are also discovering what the potentials are for becoming human. And their engagement in struggles, in support, in solidarity is a really important dimension here for understanding that these are concurrent struggles. And I think many people, especially in the global South, understand, if not verbally, but intuitively, that if they succeed in what they're doing in Palestine, they will come after us. They will treat us the same way in our struggles when they try to take over. But it's also interesting that this whole struggle and the opposition of the US, of the European powers, Australia, New Zealand, and so on, all the supporters of the genocide, how they've revealed their own cultural decadence, the decay, or not so much the decay as a revelation of what it actually means to be part of a colonial empire. And it's really, really interesting to see how their culture has become really revealed. And it's, let's remember, 2 days ago, it was 80 years ago that the first atomic bomb was dropped on Hiroshima. And today is the 80th anniversary of the dropping of an atomic bomb in Nagasaki. And it is estimated that somewhere between 100 and 240,000 people were killed in Japan as a result. In contrast, and I think this is a really important thing, in contrast, more than 70,000 tons of explosives have been dropped in an area just a few kilometers wide and about the distance, it's maybe 50 kilometers at the very most in terms of length. And it is the scale of bombing in Gaza has been in excess of the combined bomb tonnage dropped on Dresden, Hamburg, London, and in the World War II, or the equivalent of 5 Hiroshima bombs. It's hardly surprising that from the recent reports, the estimate is that 20% of Gaza's population has been murdered. That amounts to somewhere around 420,000 people murdered, massacred, eliminated. And yet, in spite of that, this attempt to destroy the culture of people of Palestine has been, and I'm convinced will be, a signal failure. For while they destroyed the institutions and memories of the culture, the institutions, the memories and culture of the art forms, the music and so on, all of that which is associated with being human remains both in Palestine as in the diaspora. And I think we should always remember also that 1948, the year of the Nakba, the beginning of the ethnic cleansing and genocide of Palestinians, that was the same year that the Universal Declaration of Human Rights was announced. And we must remember also, it was announced in a period when the vast majority of the world was still under colonial rule. And this tradition of massacres, killings, and a suppression of independence movements for self-determination, movements to reclaim humanity, has been a long tradition. For example, France gathered 400 Muslim scholars and decapitated them during the occupation of Chad in 1917. When France entered the Algerian city of Laghouat in 1852, it killed 2/3 of the population and burned them alive in a single night. There were numerous other examples that we can talk about. And this morning, I received a leaked confidential document in which the American delegate to the United Nations has held a meeting with the Israelis, and specifically to say that in the coming period, they're going to coordinate and collaborate, then get the UN to collaborate with the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. The Gaza Humanitarian Foundation is a killer institution. It had probably 4 or 5 humanitarian workers. The rest are mercenaries. And they have been systematically killing people who are coming to find food, starving people who are coming there. They're shooting young boys in the testicles. They're shooting children in the head. They're shooting them in the heart. This is nothing short of an inducement to kill people. And it's a revelation that this is what the West is about. Genocide, land grabbing, colonialism, mass murder, looting have always been at the core of imperial capital since its birth. And the complicity of silence and the arming of Israel, despite the current genocide in Gaza and the West Bank, is a deep reflection of the continuity of colonial thinking of European and US governments. Indeed, the very foundations of Israel was based on an expression of vicious European anti-Semitism. This is a real irony, They claim that anyone who speaks out against the genocide is anti-Semitic, but in fact, the foundation of the state of Israel was encouraged because it was a way of getting rid of Jews out of Europe and elsewhere. Even Canada refused to accept Jewish people who were escaping from the Holocaust. But as Aimé Césaire has pointed out, the West was outraged by the Holocaust carried out in Germany, not because it was such a nasty thing, because all it was doing was copying exactly what they had been doing in the colonies across the world. And what they protested about, Aimé says, is that it was being done to white folk, to the Europeans. That was unacceptable. And so as a result, Israel was populated with these Ashkenazi Jews from Europe. And we must remember that recent reports where they have looked at DNA samples, it's shown that these Ashkenazi Jews have absolutely no connection with the original Judaic populations in the Palestine area. And I think what we're seeing now is the far right, the rise of the far right, the rise of Trump and his racist MAGA movement, and the emergence of a Nazi equivalent of the brown shirts in the form of ICE, are all a reflection of the moral decay, the decadence of the West. And these movements are deeply racist and misogynist. Modern day capitalism cannot survive without indulging in violence. This is the root of culture of the ruling classes. And in contrast, I take inspiration from the fact the majority of the world population are vehemently against Israel's genocide and in support of Palestinian liberation. The popular masses are bearers of their own culture. They are its source. And at the same time, they are the only entity truly capable of preserving and creating culture, in other words, of making history. Let me leave it at that point.
Thank you for Professor Philos sharing with us the experiences and reflections on the cultural resistance in Palestine. Previously, I had only seen TV news of the tragedies in Palestine. But today, hearing Philos' account, I was once again very shocked. Those figures, the documents, the data in the history of Palestine's Holocaust. So thank you again for Professor.
Thank you.
According to the sequence listed in the meeting manual, we will invite the next speaker, President from Trans-Africa Gambia, Ebrima SALL.
Okay, good afternoon and hello everyone. And let me also begin by thanking the organizers, Kenchi, Margaret, Professor Wen, and the whole team for the invitation, and congratulations for keeping this forum going over all these years. I know it takes a lot of sacrifices, a lot of resources and time to get it to happen, and you've been able to keep it going all these years. And every time one has the impression that this edition is probably better than all the previous ones. So thank you and congratulations again. I think after this powerful speech from my brother Firoz, it is difficult to find words to say something. I think he's really spoken very eloquently about how culture is central to everything that is happening. The first speaker also made reference to wars, as there's their sort of impacting on cultures. So I think the choice of this particular theme is important, because cultural sustainability is actually, if I may put it that way, the bedrock of all sustainability, right? It is without it, you can't seriously think about any other kind of sustainability, including sustainability of the climate, and the two are linked very closely. I had actually on the list of points I wanted to make the situations in which a number of countries going through difficult times, like Gaza is being probably the single most important and critical situation today. And again, thanks Firoz for putting it just so squarely on the table. But one can also see what is happening in Sudan today, or in Libya, or in the eastern, the Democratic Republic of Congo, or in parts of the Sahel, where the destruction, the killings are going on, the destruction of everything that is of significance to people's lives is also going on. And I think that's something that really needs to be underscored. And in some sense, again, thanks to all the references you have mentioned, Cabral, Césaire, we could also add Fanon to the list, and many others. But when we were speaking about the West and then to the rest of the world, my mind went to Walter Mignolo's work on the darker side of the European Renaissance, and another very important book he wrote on the darker side of Western modernity. Which just shows that some of the things that have impacted negatively on cultures in the African continent and in different parts of the world, include the enslavement of people en masse. I'm speaking from Senegal, not far from where I am sitting. You have Gorée Island, where tens of thousands of people were put in boats through a door called a door of no return to the Americas. And there were many other places like that on the continent, in Benin, Porto Novo, in Zanzibar, in East Africa, and other places. So people were taken out of their context and shipped, and tied and chained and put in the bottoms of boats and carried across the oceans. And so those are practices which have been studied, and the impact on the development of global capitalism has been documented very eloquently and very clearly. People like Walter Rodney, How Europe Underdeveloped Africa, Eric Williams on Capitalism and Slavery, and so many others have just explained how the development of capitalism has gone hand in hand with the destruction of lives, the destruction of properties, the looting of, entire regions of the world to make that happen. I think what we are looking at today in the context of this particular session, I wanted to refer to a few things. One is, first of all, what have been the threats and what have been the experience, of Africa in particular, but also of the global South, in terms of culture and cultural, sustainability. What have been the threats? What have been the attacks? With wars have definitely been one. Climate change also has had an impact on it in a number of places, leading to the displacement of, a large number of people. Africa, as you know, is the continent that concentrates the largest number of internally displaced people and refugees. And some of these people their movement has been related not only to wars, but also to the fact that climate change has had its impact. I think what has happened in those contexts is also how these displacements have led to degradation of cultures. Related to the wars is, and I'll come back to that point in a minute, the fact that they have not only been destroying, they have also been taking away precious cultural heritage resources from all these places. And there is a whole movement now on restitution of cultural resources, heritage resources taken away from different places. And it's a global movement, and I'll come back to it in a minute. What I want to begin with is to refer to a document called the African Charter, or the Charter for African Cultural Renaissance. The Charter for African Cultural Renaissance that was adopted by the African Union in 2006. And the Charter says that any human community is necessarily governed by rules and principles based on culture, and culture should be regarded as the set of distinctive linguistic, spiritual, material, intellectual, and emotional features of the society or social group. And it encompasses many things, including literature, lifestyles, ways of living together, value systems, traditions, and beliefs, and so on and so forth. And all cultures emanate from societies, communities, groups, and individuals. And they obviously have a bearing on how these societies function and how the sustainability of development process in those contexts also, goes. It's a right of every people to make sure that, therefore, their cultures are preserved and protected. And the lived experience of Africans, as I said, has been all this enslavement, in large numbers, in millions, because transatlantic slave trade was, about millions of people being shipped and sold as, slaves to work on plantations in the Americas. The second thing that has been important in terms of, a direct attack on culture is just colonialism, its complexity. Colonialism was an upfront attack on culture. Of course, genocide is the extreme form. Colonialism also has been a deliberate, attempt to destroy, to sideline, to marginalize, to underrate cultures, languages, religions, beliefs of the people, and that's one way of legitimizing the domination of the colonial powers, and that has left, an imprint and a mark on the populations that were subjected to colonial domination. And this is not confined to Africa; it's again across the global South. Talking about things that were taken away under colonialism, illegally or illegitimately, even when it was legal, is the fact that heritage resources have been shipped out. There's a study that was done by a Senegalese economist, philosopher called Felwine Sarr, and a French woman, historian called Bénédicte Savoy in 2018, on the heritage resources, African heritage resources in European museums. In France alone, they counted something like 90,000, artifacts in the public collections only, not even talking about what is in private collections. 90,000 in the public collections in France, taken away from Africa. And there's a whole movement for the restitution of those heritage resources back to Africa, because in a sense, it's as if part of the identity of these peoples have been amputated. So colonial domination destroyed systems on the ground. All the things that decolonial scholars have called epistemicide, they destroyed knowledge systems. Linguicide, they destroyed languages or sidelined them, and other forms of destruction or marginalization. And then assimilating the elites into Western forms and civilizations. And then, of course, they took away all these resources that are part of the cultural heritage. The second thing that colonialism did, of course, was the introduction of educational, political, economic systems that were modeled on the West, and that sort of sidelined all that we had in place. Africa is the home to the oldest universities in the world. I mean, the first university in the world was the one that was founded in Tunisia, the Zaytuna University. The second one, founded by a woman, is in Morocco, and it is still continuing, the Qarawiyyin University. And the third one is Al-Azhar University in Cairo. 3 of the oldest universities in the world have been on the African continent. And then at some point, with the introduction of the Western systems, a whole body of knowledges and institutions were sidelined, and intellectuals, they are taken as second category, second class institutions. And obviously, the whole history was also rewritten. And part of the rewriting of history was to deny Africans of having any history at all. And the same thing, of course, was done to other people elsewhere, the indigenous peoples. Cyrus, you are in Canada, you know this better than I do. But the story of the indigenous peoples, what they are subjected to in all across the Americas, including in Canada, is a horrific story, of people being, subjected to all forms of indignities and sterilizations and, opening schools for kids and building reserves, to the extent that it is actually argued that apartheid South Africa was sort of inspired by some of these experiences that were tried with indigenous peoples elsewhere. So that is about culture. It is about people's lives. It's about the whole existences of these communities and societies. And when you have an educational system now built on top of that, and a kind of shift towards everything that is of value is everything that is modeled on the West, is everything that is sort of resembling as closely as possible to what was brought and what they hold as valuable. And so until today, we have this bifurcation in our systems. Mass indigenous knowledge has been sidelined. We know that Alexandria in Egypt, Carthage in Tunisia today, Timbuktu in Mali were centers of great cultural developments, centers of learning that draw people from different parts of the world who came there. And all those places were destroyed through invasions of various kinds. So in a sense, it is the whole development process of these societies concerned that were sort of diverted by the direct attack on cultures and the direct attack on economies and societies. And of course, the looting of resources was not only about cultural heritage, it was about mineral resources, and about people and trafficking of all kinds that was taken away. And so what I want to say now is, in the face of that, what is going on now? There is this struggle, and which is why I cited the African Charter for Cultural Renaissance. There is a struggle to, first of all, reclaim our humanity, as Firoz rightly said, reclaim our sovereignty, and reclaim our cultures, which is a step that is necessary for reclaiming our futures. Okay, there is this charter, and then there is a whole movement for restitution of all the objects that are taken away, and of the spiritual. Some of these are not objects; they're actually part of the lives of, spiritual lives of the society is concerned, and claiming that they be brought back. It was a restitution movement that is again not confined to Africa. Right now, actually, one of the most active countries in the restitution movement is Greece, who have been admitted as a non-permanent member of the Security Council earlier this year. And Greece has recently spearheaded the adoption of a resolution that was seconded by 146 states, calling for the restitution of heritage resources that were taken away from communities and societies, but also for the looting to stop. Because so long as you have these wars going on, the looting of heritage resources is continuing until today. And so that sort of the bleeding of cultural resources needs to be stopped. So Greece is one country claiming it. China, had its resources taken away when Japan occupied. South Korea, similarly. Iraq has its resources taken away. And the same thing happens wherever you have rich heritage resources. Egypt has lost a lot to the West, and these are in collections in the news. So there's a whole movement for restitution. Now, restitution, the dictionary definition of it is actually to restore something that was lost or stolen to its proper owner. Okay, and one example is what is going on in South Africa today, when the ANC during the liberation struggle was calling for land that was taken away from South Africans to be given back to them. A restitution of land, but it's also a restitution of all these things that have been taken away. Now, that is another rendition of the restitution, is actually recompense for injury or loss. For instance, a court can order someone to pay a certain amount of money in restitution or in compensation for damages that were done. So this links the problematic of restitution to the problem of reparations. And there is a movement for reparations that has been going on and is closely connected with liberation struggles all along. And today, this year, has been declared by the African Union as the Year of Justice for Africans and people of African descent, connecting this issue of reparations with the issue of restitution. I want to move fast forward because I'm told my time is getting up, to emphasize two things. The threat to cultural sustainability today comes again from neoliberal globalization and from all the ways in which our cultures and our development processes have been impacted upon in negative ways. But it's also about the fact that I think the first speaker referred to the young people who are socialized in a kind of pop culture. Was it Firoz who talked about pop culture, today? And so there is a need to ground them better in cultures that are much more progressive. That's number one. Number two, we are also seeing situations in which multinational companies are the same everywhere. Very precious works of art have been copied, and then the kente cloth of Ghana, have been copied and then are now being printed in all kinds of cheap ways. And so it sort of empties these things of their great cultural value. And whole professions in Egypt have been downgraded because of these movements that are directly connected to capitalism and how it is deploying itself. Now, one of the big things that we have to confront today is that these issues are not about the past, they are about the future. And again, I will rejoin my brother Firoz on that one. Restitution and reparation and cultural sustainability is actually about the future we want to reimagine, the future we want to build in our continents and in the world. Like, it's about a world to reimagine, it's about a world to build on justice, on reparative justice, on much more sustainable grounds for everyone and inclusive of everyone, where everybody has their dignity and their rights upheld. Now, the issue of artificial intelligence coming to these conversations now inevitably. People do incredible things with AI, and it is more and more difficult to disentangle some of the things that one sees as what is authentic cultural production here with what is something that has been made up entirely with AI. I think that is something we need to exercise our minds upon, and everybody needs really to pay attention to what those processes are and make use of this thing that is potentially a huge resource for the world, AI, and make sure that it is also sort of turned to and put into uses that are more empowering, more liberating, more of part of the emancipatory processes than the creation of new dependencies and perversions of cultural artifacts. I want to conclude by saying that, again, I think the organizers were well inspired to end this whole conversation with cultural sustainability, because at the end of the day, it's about human beings. It's about what in Southern Africa they call Ubuntu, and Suleiman Bashir Diagne, a Senegalese scholar, philosopher, has demonstrated that Ubuntu, which means collective humanity, our collective humanity, basically, to put it simply, our collective humanity. There's a version of it that says Ubuntu is I am because you are. That was Desmond Tutu's simplification of it, but it's about a collective humanity. Now, Suleiman Bashir Diagne says in Wolof, there is a proverb that says nit nitei garabam, that a human being's solution, the solution to a human being's problems is with other human beings. And a version of that one says the solution to the human being's problems is in being more humane, in superior forms of humanism. Humanism that is not anthropocentric, that is not only looking at people and human beings into the detriment of the environment and to other peoples, but it's a humanism that is respectful of the equilibria that needs to happen between people and the planet, between people and other inhabitants of the planet. Now, in that sense, it is about, again, centering values of solidarity, of oneness, issues that have now been made taboo words and dirty words. Solidarity is a problem that the current American administration is saying that they have an issue with South Africa's presidency of the G20, whatever one thinks about the G20. But they're saying that they have committed a crime by taking solidarity as one of his themes. Solidarity, sustainability, is the theme of South African G20 presidency. And that is an issue for the Americans, to the point of boycotting meetings in South Africa. So I think we need to recenter the values that make us human beings and rehumanize the world. And I believe the rehumanization of the world will come through the resolution of some of the most critical elements and the stopping of practices as we are observing in some parts of the world, including Gaza in particular. Thank you very much for the time and for the opportunity.
Okay, thank you for President Ebrima for presenting his thoughts on cultural sustainability in such a time like digital AI capitalism and also post-humanist. Thank you again. So now let's invite Vashi Butalia from India, director of Zuban Books. Vashi, please.
Yeah,
Okay.
hi, thank you very much. Thank you. First of all, let me echo everyone to say I'm really grateful to be invited to speak here, and also really full of admiration to you and the team for keeping this going, this forum going for so long and keeping it going so well. What I'm going to do is to speak to really move away from what the previous three speakers have done, and to narrow down the scale of the subject to a really, really tiny part of India, and to look at some work that is happening over there, partly with our involvement, the involvement of the organization that I work with, and hopefully in some ways use that story to reflect on some of the points, the really valuable points that have been made. The name of the place I'm talking about is a small state in the northeastern part of India. It's called Manipur, where in the last 3 years, there has been a terrible and really bloody conflict between two groups of people. One of them who by and large occupy the plains, and the other who by and large occupy the hill regions of the state. One of them, the Métis, are seen as a more mainstream and, if you like, a more privileged community, and the others are a group of Kuki, Zo tribals who are perhaps seen as not coming from so much privilege, and the political power in that state has largely been held by people from the first community that I named. Now, the conflict in the last 3 years has reached such a stage that people who were separate, different, but often intermarried, and were certainly close friends and worked very well together, are now unable to do that. They are fearful of doing that, and this has, of course, destroyed relationships that already exist in terms of marriages and so on and so forth. But it has also destroyed an extremely healthy civil society network that existed, which looked at many things in the region, including a cross-section of women being the primary people who fought for peace among the many factions of insurgents, if you like, who were fighting in the region. And that those peace committees of women were cross-class, cross-region, cross-identity, and so on. What has happened now is the total isolation, where if people in the hills wish to take a flight out of the state, they are not allowed to cross the roads of the capital city, which would get them to the airport from their place in an hour or two. Instead, they have to travel on foot and by bus to the neighboring states, a journey which takes 24 hours as opposed to 2, to take a flight to, say, get to Delhi or someplace else. Now, a few months ago, we were approached by a group of people in the hill regions to ask if we, the organization I work for, would be willing to conduct some workshops with young people in their community, because they had all been displaced to a new place, and they did not know when they would ever be able to get back to their homes. And with the displacement had been lost the entire cultural grounding in terms of the stories that were held by old people, many of whom were left behind, in terms of the cultural artifacts that might have been there, in terms of the stones, the plants, the forests, the flowers, and everything that meant a lot to people in terms of their culture. And they did not want to lose this, and they wanted to know if an organization from outside could come and do workshops to train young people to write stories about what they felt they had lost and to try and recover some of that, and then to archive some of that. And this was seen as one of the key methods of survival. So to me, that small example of what this community wishes to do and the fact that it wants to involve young people in it is deeply evocative of the importance of culture and the importance of retaining culture and its fundamental grounding in the search for sustainability, because without that, where do you actually go? And I want to now just expand this a little more to tell you about something else that the organization has been doing in the region. And I am not saying this in order to advertise what we are doing or anything, but I myself, as someone who's been working on this for some years, have learned a great deal from it. And I think that some of that might offer us some kind of hope, because the global scenario seems so deeply lacking in any kind of hope, really. So what we do is, Manipur is the state I talked about, but the entire region where it is located comprises 8 states, which have been somewhat on the periphery of the country, not only in geographical terms, but also in racial terms, because the people living there have a racial similarity much more with the Burmese, the Koreans, to some extent the Chinese, than they do with what is known as mainland India. And so they've always been seen as somewhat apart. And that has been a cause for a great deal of insult and jibes and stereotyping when they come to mainland India to study or for any other purpose. So, and the entire region is typically known as a region of conflict, because there are a number of conflicts against the Indian state for autonomy, recognition, etc., etc. And there are a lot of factional battles between the communities there too who are fighting. So about 8 or 9 years ago, we floated the idea of a writing fellowship for young people, and it was meant to be for people who were under the age of 40, to use writing as a tool for memory and as a tool for peace, but not to write directly about peace, but to write about anything that they wanted to write about, which was close to their hearts. We wanted to know what young people caught in a region of conflict were thinking about and what was important to them. And the kinds of proposals that came in were amazing, because many talked about food cultures, and many talked about the subjects, the things that we have already been talking about now, in terms of repatriating much of their cultural heritage taken away by the colonizers, such as the remains of their ancestors, which too were really important for them to bring back. So there is a movement for the repatriation of Naga remains, which is a very strong movement, involves a lot of young people. Many talked about their grandmothers and the kitchens they ran, and many talked about local governance, and many talked about things like queerness, queer narratives, stories of marginalization, of local traditions, of women's markets, and so on and so forth. And over the years, they wrote some 20, 25 research papers a year, which are published digitally on our website and are made available for free. And in doing so, they also addressed something that all of us have been talking about, which is the loss of literature, the loss of institutions of learning. And here they were, young people producing learning which is of a different nature altogether from the research studies that are academically conducted, but which is nonetheless very, very valid and very close to what goes on the ground, and which contains within it, if you look at the range of the papers, so many of the threats to culture that are taking place in this region, so much of the resistance that is there, and so much of the love for culture. So out of those papers grew things like songs, which were then put together across regions and across differences, and which are, of course, loaded on YouTube to be used. So a range of things were happening at the same time, which was the importance of culture is being established over and over again by the people for whom that culture is in danger of being lost. And its sustainability is being talked about as a way of holding their communities together, because along with the writing came a desire from on the ground, from communities to say, we want to create local archives of our traditions. We want to create local archives of our food cultures. We want to hold community kitchens across our differences to see if we can talk. So I just wanted to mention this experiment to you because I felt that in some ways, in looking at the larger picture, which is of course very, very important because it influences, it impacts all of us, it's difficult to hold off the despair. But in looking at the lives of people who are caught in terrible violence and terrible conflict and who have known no other reality even as children, to see what meaning culture holds and to see if a pathway can be designed for them to be able to even talk about this or even think about this or document this in some way is perhaps a path to survival. I'm not talking about any certainties here. I'm very consciously using the word perhaps. And for me, what it means is, as somebody who is an outsider, you know, it's very easy for us to say, oh, that conflict doesn't impact me because it's miles away from where I am. But as all of you have shown in your speeches, conflicts don't have to be right next to us for us to feel and to understand what they're doing. And for us, based far away in faraway Delhi, where we haven't seen this kind of thing, it is a real education to see how much hope even a small initiative holds. A tiny thing, a short paper written by somebody, an exhibition made up of objects collected which capture your history. All of these things are so meaningful. And I just wanted to remind us that the small things also matter, and sometimes we need to look at them. And I will end there. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, Director Vashi. And I'd like to say sorry for the noise I made just now, because my cat had been scratching the door outside all the time. And I had thought it's my son who were causing the trouble. And thank you again for providing us with a very enlightening case. That is how to help those marginalized people express their voices and help them to spread widely their narratives. I think this is a very important experience. Okay, let's invite our last speaker, Romelo, Director Romelo from Colombia, People's Health Movement.
Thank you very much. Now I'm speaking from the Spanish channel, and I would like to share a presentation that I have as a guide. The presentation is in English. I don't know if you can see it already, or maybe not yet. Not yet. Can you see my presentation now?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Thank you very much. So first of all, I would like to tell you that I am speaking from Rio de Janeiro in Brazil, where I am now participating in the Latin American and Caribbean Congress on Health, Collective Health, and Social Medicine. This has been a very vibrant conference with a lot of debate and discussion, where also all the topics related to culture have been addressed and analyzed at length, and there has been a lot of discussion, and I have learned a lot. Unfortunately, for this reason, I haven't been able to participate in the forum, and I have only been able to attend this particular session, and I have missed out on the large and amazing lessons and reflections that the forum has produced up to now and has generated. But I would like to offer my perspective, my point of view on the topic that we are here to discuss today. And I would like to do so by taking into account the contributions that have been made on the case of Gaza and Palestine, which we must support and we must demand and fight for the ending of genocide and for the Palestine people to be free and have self-determination. I have heard with a lot of attention the presentation of our comrade from Africa, from Dakar, and from our comrade from India as well. And they have all given us powerful lessons to understand what we are facing and the challenges that we have in the current world. From this conference and Congress on Social Collective Medicine and Health, I would like to present 3 phrases that I believe are important. Facing the challenges that we are amidst right now, we must resist, as we have done historically. We must re-exist, reconfigure ourselves, strengthen ourselves, but we must also sow a lot of hope. Here in Brazil, we say we must hope. We must not be pessimists. We must construct hope in the struggle of people or within the struggle of peoples. The question is maybe, where can we draw this strength from? Where can we draw the will to achieve this? And maybe we need to learn from historical experiences and from theoretical lessons that are part of these historical or that have emerged from these historical experiences, which I will not refer to in particular. To introduce the topic that I want to address today, especially 2 topics: how can we achieve in this context the achievement of cultural sustainability? How can we construct an intercultural counter-hegemony, and how, with what rules, with what ethics, can we establish an intercultural dialogue by rescuing the historicity of culture, its material heritage, its immaterial or intangible heritage, and as a consequence of all of this, the huge and very rich cultural diversity that constitutes us as human beings and as nature, which I believe is very important. We, as our indigenous peoples, say and state in Latin America, we cannot differentiate ourselves simply from nature because we are an integral part of it. So with this, I would like to introduce some elements that will enable us to explore these possibilities of cultural sustainability through an intercultural counter-hegemony, and through a transcultural ethics that enables us to establish a dialogue to learn from diverse cultures. Of course, the first thing that we need to acknowledge, that we need to remember, is that we have been subjects, and particularly in Latin America and in the Caribbean, of a cultural domination, of a cultural domination that has sustained itself on capitalism itself, that has destroyed our cultures and has qualified us as non-humans. That was the assumption the colonizers started off with to destroy us materially and culturally. They established us as non-humans. And upon this colonial route, capitalism was imposed upon us in its individualistic and destructive knowledge, destructive of nature. And of course, imperial domination that is sustained upon capitalism and that we experience in our peoples. So from then on, a hegemony has been imposed, a cultural domination has been imposed that has either dominated our cultures and devaluated them and has not been able to recognize, to acknowledge interculturality that we need as a path to cultural sustainability and cultural diversity. Or if one would want to speak of multiculturalism that exists in societies. Right now, we need to take into account and I believe that the case of Palestine is an example of this, that emanating from this cultural, capitalistic, imperialist domination, there are other subcultures that have emerged. For example, racism that we experience against indigenous peoples, against Black communities that came from Africa, enslaved during the colonial period to our regions, and of course against patriarchy or patriarchalism. It's important to say that in Latin America, the source of patriarchy is in the humiliation of men through the domination of violence towards women. And this culture subsists today, even today, in our institutions, in our ways of being, in our ways of relating with each other. And of course, the subculture of fascism that we have lived during the Second World War, and Zionism today, that is fed by the domination of capitalism that subjugates us. These are topics that are a challenge to us. And of course, other forms are expressed, such as multiculturalism, but multiculturalism really is constructed as a form of domination as well, because it is the legitimization, the asymmetric legitimization of dominant cultures with a touch of multiculturalism. We will then need to rescue, in order to think, in order to create an anti-hegemonic interculturalism, we must go back to history. And I want to go back to Marx, because the lessons of Marxism are that the material basis of culture is production, is distribution, consumption, the development of productive forces, the division of labor. And these material foundations are historically changing, shifting. These are socioeconomic relations that change historically and that also determine, and this has been clear throughout this forum and has always been clear in these forums, that has determined our way of relating to nature. If culture is historical and it has these foundations, then culture is in a constant struggle. It has an agonistic content of struggle, of debate, of power relations that are very deep. And of course, in this sense, it is part of the class struggle, of the gender relations and race relations that incorporate power and knowledge relations that might become dominant in relation to class dominations or racial dominations, etc. This is what Marxism teaches us. It's its lesson. And I believe that we need to go and look into our realities in each corner of the world, and we need to understand what is happening in terms of the cultural relations that we have. But I would also like to draw from our indigenous peoples in Latin America and the Caribbean, and why not from North America as well, meaning from the Americas at large, of what we call in our Latin languages, what we call the Abya Yala, which is the name of our continent, the original name of our continent. It is not America. America is the colonial name, but our original name is the Abya Yala. We need to resignify the names of our territories and our continents as a part of this cultural struggle. But our peoples, our nations have had a legacy, and they have maintained it in spite of the colonialism and the imperial legacy. They have been able to maintain an ancestral culture rooted in communal practices of community relationship, communal community relationships, and of an acknowledgement of ourselves as a comprehensive part of Mother Earth. There is a huge breakthrough there, not only for cultural sustainability, but also for ecological sustainability, which is a deep, deep lesson from our peoples in Latin America and the Caribbean. And our peoples express these traditions, these cultural traditions, every day, at each moment, through their ritual expressions of their dances, their songs, their medical traditional knowledge, their forms of nourishing and feeding. And there is no doubt that there is an ethics of self-care there, that the care of the other has to be done in collectivity, in community, and in relation to the care of Mother Earth. In synthesis, we could say that we have a cultural ecology, built upon the basis, the foundations of an ecology of knowledge, a diversity of knowledges that are in dialogue, but also an ecology of care, of forms of care that are very important and that are a historical legacy of our traditional peoples. We, therefore, taking into account this historical accumulation, we have ways to denounce capitalist and imperialist practices of extractivism that destroys us, that depredates and pillages our territories and peoples through the processes of agrobusiness, deforestation, the destruction of the sacred sites of the indigenous peoples, where knowledge is synthesized, but also the care of our peoples is synthesized as a practice that teaches us every day how we should constitute ourselves as different beings, different from the capitalist, colonial, imperial colonialism. These are forms that help us survive, that help us protect our resources, that help us fight against inequalities, social inequalities, and against the climate injustices that cross us in our forms of existence.
Now, how can we face or foresee a cultural sustainability if it is not by being nourished by the traditions, the ancestral, democratic traditions of our peoples, and of the social and economic relations that might be the most progressive ones and which are consolidated in the production modes, in the exchange modes beyond capitalism. It is by resorting to these kind of processes that we will be able to keep cultural sustainability. In order to keep ecological sustainability, which is so necessary at these times of crisis, climate crisis, social crisis. So we can say that these are the sources for a harmonious cultural relation between humans and between the human beings and nature. So this is based on the democratic contributions, on the socialist contributions. We need to say this because there is no other alternative to capitalism to create a sustainable culture. There is nothing else than socialism, new social economic ways based on that. So within that context, from a strategic perspective, we state that there is a need to struggle, to have an anti-capitalist struggle by using methods to interact with one another in what we call the contra-hegemonic interculturality or transcultural ethics, something that allows a dialogue between equals, not a dialogue of someone subjected to the hegemonic powers. Therefore, creating this counter-hegemonic interculturality implies that we need to create an exchange of knowledge among our own peoples, in our own territories, among the different peoples as well, that is to say, with different traditions, different historical roots, but also with external cultures, external from our peoples, our communities. That's what it is all about. If we have diversity, cultural diversity, that is historical as well, then we are facing dominant cultures and we need to have a counter-hegemonic interculturality. It's not just that any relation or any exchange of knowledge, of care, will do. It will have to be a kind of knowledge that is anti-capitalist, anti-imperialist, anti-Zionist. That's what this is all about. So when thinking about that, when thinking about this counter-hegemonic interculturality, there are needs. We need to recognize that there are some needs. We are struggling a lot in our own territories in order to decolonize our thoughts. We struggle in order to put into practice critical approaches based on our knowledge, based on imperialism, for example. In the case of the health systems, Latin America has created a theoretical approach of how to create social medicine to defend the traditional medicines as well of our ancient peoples that we call the social determination of health. It's not what the WHO says. It's like the Latin American and deeply anti-capitalist style, which is not the stance of the WHO. Just to give you an example. So by means of these kind of examples, we value, we protect, and we foster, and we try to give priority to this ancestral knowledge, to the wisdom, I would say, of women mainly, and the wisdom of peasants in our own territories, and of all the workers who are struggling. So that's what I mean by that, a dialogue of knowledge that may enable us to create what in Latin America we use or we call as this kind of shared category. We call it good living. It's not a question of well-being, the well-being of the capitalist European states. It's a good living, which is a much richer category, which includes harmony, it includes balance, it includes the ways of distributing and consuming together with nature. So it's a quality of life, good living. That's what we talk about, a kind of a hope that we have to build on a daily basis. And just to wrap up, in order to advance in that direction, the indigenous communities, the female indigenous leaders of Latin America and of our ancient peoples of the Colombian Caribbean, they've called our attention to this. They say, in order to keep these counter-hegemonic processes, we need to build consensus about the basics in the face of the challenges of the current world, such as discrimination, inequality, the climate crisis, the unfair wars that are imposed on our peoples. And we need to build agreements, consensus about what is essential within the framework of cultural diversity, because we are diverse. And that implies that we need to acknowledge, to start from acknowledgement and protection of the cultures of our own peoples. So it is based on that, on being based on the cultures of our own peoples, that we will be able to create dialogue, that we will be able to open up a space for participation, that we will be able to reach agreements to open up new possibilities of hope, facing the occupations, facing the private interests, capitalist and imperialist interests, facing the ecocide of all kinds. I'm not only talking about ecology here, I'm talking about ecocides of all natures that we can experience when we see the genocides, because we are victims of it, and we have been actually victims of it in the past as well. The first genocide of the Latin American peoples was the process of colonization by the dominant European powers. But it seems to be that we haven't learned of history, because in our Latin American veins, there is an ecocide, there is a genocide, there is an ethnic cleansing of the Palestine people as well. So those are the bases, the common bases that I would like to share with you, so as to rethink about a possibility of interculturality that might be wider, more global, more related to the cultural diversity that we have, and with the possibility of rescuing from that cultural diversity, rescuing the most progressive contributions, most democratic contributions that may enable us to build a future, that enable us to continue living in the same planet on Earth in harmony, and with justice, both social and ecological justice. Thank you.
Muchas gracias por director Romero. Él compartió con nosotros cómo combinar la experiencia indígena de América Latina con el marxismo para construir el ecosocialismo, que yo creo que es muy significante en este ciclo. Gracias. Okay, thank you very much to the 5 speakers for their wonderful presentations. Starting from their own local experiences, they shared with us valuable insights and thoughts on how to resist, how to maintain vitality, and how to help communities achieve sustainable development in this era, where I think capitalism is getting worse, more cruel, and more shameless. I noticed some speakers, some common concerns in all these 5 speeches, such as identifying the reflective and resistance elements in subcultures, actively promoting their development, and helping these suppressed narratives spread, and diffuse. At the same time, we need to establish extensive connections and extensive exchanges so that all local experiences do not remain confined to just our own surroundings, but unite with other resistant powers around the world and echo with each other. Due to time constraints, there may still many issues and viewpoints that have not been expressed yet. Now we enter the open time for these sections, and everyone is welcome to freely speak and comment. And I would like to invite Kinchi to chair the discussion. Okay, Kinchi, please.
At first, maybe I would like to invite you to comment on each other. So after hearing each other, do you see any things that you would want to highlight, or would you want to add to the discussions?
Yeah, one of the common things, I mean, first of all, what an excellent panel. Thank you, all of you, for your contributions. But one of the common things that came up, there are two things that came up. One is relating to hope, and the other is relating to sustainability. And I'd like to comment on both of those. But before I start, let me read a very short poem from Yahya Lababedi, a Palestinian poet, from a book called Palestine Whale. It goes like this. It's called Hope. Hope's not quite as it seems. It's slimmer than you'd think and less steady on its feet. Sometimes it's out of breath, can hardly see ahead and cries itself to sleep. It may not tell you all this or the times it cheated death, but if you knew it, you'd know how hope can keep a secret. I think this is an important contribution because I think our responsibilities as intellectuals is to shelter hope. It is absolutely essential that we shelter hope and give it space for building a future. And that leads me to my second point. And that is, you know, when I look at the nature of cultural practices in our countries, I do not want to sustain them. I have no interest in sustaining them because they are oppressive, they are foreign, they are dominating. So I'd like to just point out things that Fanon, because I think Ebrima quite rightly raised the issue of Fanon. And as Fanon described it, culture never has the translucency of custom. Culture eminently eludes any form of simplification. In its essence, it is the very opposite of custom, which is always a deterioration of culture. Seeking to stick to tradition or reviving neglected tradition is not only going against history, but against one's people. National culture is no folklore. It is the collective thought process of a people to describe, justify, and extol the actions whereby they have joined forces and remained strong. And I think the point here is that Rama talked about quite rightly about the ecology of culture, but ecology is never fixed, it's never static, it is constantly growing, it's constantly developing. And I think what we have to understand, I think it's really important. Yes, Hegel tried to say that we had no history, so they stole all the vestiges of our history and destroyed what was left, and to reinforce that we have no history. But the reality is that it is in struggles. It is against struggles against oppression, the struggles for reclaiming one's humanity, that culture evolves. It's not static. It it evolves. We have seen this. And we want to look at the kind of culture that the Gen Z generation in Kenya, Abashali Basmanjondolo in South Africa, the trade union movement, workers' movement, the women's movement, the creation of culture in the struggle to reclaim one's humanity and to assert what it means to be human, to invent what it means to be human. So I think, when we're talking about sustainability, it is that sustainability of the struggle to create that culture and as an expression of where we are, rather than just fossilizing the past.
And thank you. That is beautiful. Yes. So would any of you come in? I mean, the panelists first. And anyone who would like to, well, Claudia said in the chat room that this is a beautiful poem. And thank you. So would any of you like to say something?
I would. It's good to say something after another colleague has said something, so as to be able to establish a dialogue. If not, it's just individuals speaking on their own. And I would like to agree with what Firoz has said in terms of the historicity of culture. If there is history, there are things that we can value from cultural traditions. And of course, there are also things that we would like to discard from cultural traditions, because cultural traditions also contain an internal struggle. They are not crystallizations created in a vacuum. They are the product of struggles. They can be the result of hegemonies within historical processes. But if there are impositions, then there are also resistances. How can we discover these democratic cultures and progressive cultures in history? This is very important for us to imagine and think about the future and to face all the challenges that we face today. We do not just live in culture. We construct culture, but culture is knowledge. And we live it, we experience it in order to face the challenges that we have each day in each time. This is what it is about. And I believe that a person who taught us to think about this historically was Marx. Marx didn't think about communism as an idea that emerges theoretically as a counter position to capitalism merely. He studied cultures that enabled him to understand that there could exist non-capitalistic ways of being that did not emerge from out of nowhere, but that had historical foundations. That is why he studied India. He studied the experiences of Russian peasants and Chinese peasants, but he also studied Latin American cultures, particularly Peru. That's where the ideas of a new way of being, of relating, progressive, that is a break with capitalist domination, emerge from. I believe that this is an ongoing exercise. We do not need to just consecrate cultures just because they are cultures. They're always in struggle. They are always changing. And our task as fighters, because this is not an intellectual task. This is a task of fighters. This has to do with understanding history in this intercultural dialogue.
Thank you, Human. And Ebrima wants, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you. I mean, I want to echo what both Professor Roman and Professor Manji Sipiro said. It is, first of all, thanks to Professor Roman for bringing in the material basis. I mean, the connecting culture with, the sort of relations of production, material basis production. I think that was very useful. When colonialism and all the forces of destruction, unfolded in our own spaces, they didn't select the good things and the things that were problematic. They destroyed everything, right? And I think in what was destroyed, there were certain things that were valuable. I think if you are referring to anything, you are referring to some of the things that were very, very important, very held in keeping societies together, in maintaining solidarity and justice and so on. So it's not about going to the past or going backwards. It's about the future, and that I completely agree with Firoz. It's about if I may use that phrase, it's about building forward better. So we wanna rise from the ashes, in a new setup, in a much better environment. In that sense, we carry along some of the things that we valued in the situations in which we are. Some of the things in our cultures that are valuable, some of the things that, but there are problems with our societies. We have, until today, in parts of Africa, in West Africa in particular, slavery and practices, people being held as properties of other people. People experiencing discrimination based on work and descent, and that's across the world, from India to the gypsies in Europe to the Quilombos in Brazil. So those are not things that anybody wants to preserve. So injustice has to be done away with. But it's about how do you resolve and how do you repair, and how do you move forward and create the basis for new kinds of relationships that are much based on justice, that are based on much more emancipatory foundations, I would say. So it's about going forward, but certainly not having just a blanket thing about the past, position regard to the past, but there are certain things which we wanna take along. So I think it's what's this Indian writer said, look, it's about being at a threshold. You now have to decide on what we need to take forward and what we need to just get rid of, all the problems related to patriarchy and different kinds of domination. We don't want to take that along in the new societies we're aspiring to build. Yeah.
Thank you. And let us invite Professor Dai.
So I would like to continue the conversation. In a recent reading, there's a peasant, a migrant peasant. He is part of a pop culture. Is Samate. Like he dye his hairs, dress up in quite weird costumes. And he said something very interesting. He said, in this manufacturing line, there's no history. But in Samate, this kind of pop culture, there is history. Like in China, we are facing two kinds of history. One is as like a modernized history, or you can call imperial history, or imperialized history. Another culture, it is a so-called Chinese traditional culture. And when we're talking about Chinese traditional culture, we have to see that it used to be a culture that based on class, based on hierarchy. But in a very short period in the socialist history, in the Chinese ancient culture, how could we discover the culture that belongs to people, belongs to folk, those kind of folk culture? Yeah, and how we could create a new kind of culture that are related to our traditional culture, as Samate youth said. The culture we belongs to, there's a new kind of culture that are embedded in the manufacturing line. So it's such an understanding that the past and the future are connected. So this is the culture that we keep reinventing. Yeah, this is what I say as the new hope. That's where the hope lies. And in this classic Chinese culture, is kind of a dead body, but with it carried its own soul that has all the memories. But when this soul arrive in a new body that is a new life. And I believe this kind of soul, it carries histories. Yeah, so we have to, yeah, how we could reinvent our future.
Thank you. And Claudia, would you like to say something?
Hello, good night. Very interesting. All your participations. Thank you so much for all the speakers in this night. Well, I listened to you, and I don't know why it became to my mind the topic of the spirituality, because the spirituality has been important issue in many cultures, as at least in Mexico. I know that in many other cultures. So in that sense, I would like to ask you if do you think that the spirituality is necessary for the sustainability? And if it's like that, what kind of spirituality do we need to have? I'm thinking in that in the cultures, many times the spirituality it's there in the rituals, in the food, in the celebrations. When the farmers go to their milpa, when they are working in the land, the spirituality is there. So I would like to listen. What do you think about it?
So,
What a great question.
yes, and that's Claudia from Mexico. Okay, so who would like to respond to that?
Can I
Please,
come in
Ubashi.
here?
Yes, please.
Yeah, please.
So I want to actually not only respond to Claudia's question, but also go back to the previous discussion that we were having. I think in some ways, when you articulate the question about culture in terms of sustainability, it is implicit that you are not romanticizing culture into everything wonderful about things like traditions and rituals and so on and so forth. To me, it carries the implicit assumption that we are looking at the future. There are terrible things in our culture, such as patriarchy, and nobody would want a future which carried even a memory of patriarchy, let alone, the cultural practices that patriarchy has perfected over the years. So in some senses, I think our concern, which I saw reflected in what the speakers were reflecting when we were reflecting on each other's presentations, seemed to me that in a conversation about culture, yes, you have to make those caveats and clarifications. But in a conversation where we are looking at the future, I think we know, in a sense, what we're talking about when we talk about culture. Maybe I'm wrong, but this is what I feel. And I don't want to romanticize it, as I said. It's not static or anything, but it's just something, it is an assumption, I think. And what Claudia is saying, so I don't think that we can dismiss spirituality per se as something that doesn't actually inform or cannot inform anything that we do. I think there are communities in the world for whom spirituality is very, very important. And it means something to them which is connected to daily life and daily practice. And I don't think that one should dismiss that. So we have to take that along if that is what it means to those communities. So that would be my answer to your question. Maybe it's a very simplistic answer, but that's what I think.
Thank you. So Hernan Vargas is Vice Rector of the newly established National University for Communes in Venezuela. So Hernan, please.
Greetings for everyone, and thank you for this wonderful panel. I think it's both like an excellent closure of this conference, but at the same time, it's like the opening of the of the next South Forum. So I think it's an important bridge. I only want to comment that maybe this is like I'm under the impression that during these days of discussions, we have like two major possibilities, two major tasks. One of them is that we have like a consensus, I think, about the crisis of civilization that we are living at the moment. And we have a very extensive, accurate diagnose of the different components of that crisis. So I think it's quite important to dedicate efforts to put together this puzzle, this picture of since the different components that we have had, actually having the whole picture of the planet, but specifically from the global south. So I think it's important to have this, but actually do an exercise that has been present in our discussions, but I think that we need to go deep, which is connect the dots between those different components. Like, for example, the relation between the global warmth and the mode of production, the mode of reproduction, the mode of accumulation of capital, but at the same time, that mode of production as part of a way of living, of a framework of cultural relations which are centered in the West, and that are part of different lines of domination systems, which are all connected in this Western civilization. So I think that's an important issue, especially to put it in relevance during this time, because as I think that we have been seeing during these days, we are in a very delicate moment. I think that most of the discussions have been going around the point that we are facing a moment, a delicate moment, since the end of definitions about the environment as an expression of one of the major crises. So it's important to put that in relevance at this moment. And the second task is about the necessity to put, I think that the other great consensus that we have here is that we have a part of the hope of an alternative to this civilization model in crisis. We have the hope, the possibility to substitute it in the global south, in our territories, in our different practices, that I think it's at the same time, in my opinion, a mixture of the historical roots that we have in our territories, and at the same time is a connection between that historical path of resistance and building of alternatives, also with the process that we have been building during all these years, maybe about resignification. So I think at the same time we have process of reinforcement of the historical roots, the traditional roots, from indigenous people, from peasants, from different kind of struggles, but at the same time, the struggles that we have at the moment that imply resignification of different process. It's at the same time most of the joint between the peasants struggles, the struggles from the indigenous peoples from the countryside, but at the same time with the resistant struggles in the urban level in the cities. So I think that's quite important to put together this whole summary of the different experiences and practices that give us like this hope of possibility to build an alternative. And I think it's quite important to put this together in order to start a process of building of an alternative agenda from the global south, being a moment where we have this so-called possible transition of hegemony from an imperialist hegemony of the Western civilization, where the United States and the global north at the head, that can be changing into something related or similar to the BRICS. I think that's a moment important to put the emphasis in these practices and conceptions and the knowledge built from the global south that could be our trends at the same time of decolonizing, but at the same time of the linking. I think that we have the keynotes in our territories to build a possible agenda for transformation, a possible agenda for alternative to dispute this moment that we are living in the planet. So that's just a contribution. Thank you.
Thank you. So any of the
Bueno.
speakers here would like to say something?
Yes, Roman, go ahead then. If I may answer Claudia's question, because it's usually a very interesting topic, spirituality. But maybe I would like to summarize something else related to culture, because I don't see any other way to address this. I mean, there is no just one spirituality. There are several spiritualities. So, and it was imposed on us, you know, this religious way of spirituality, the Western Catholic, it is burned in our veins. So our peoples had their own spiritual ways of relating to nature, for example, and they were taken away as non-spiritual ways of relating, not the right way to connecting to spirituality. So first of all, we should acknowledge that there are different spiritualities based on each community, each people. And there is an intention of imposing one spirituality. I think that that's what Zionism wants to do in away with, for example, the spirituality of the Palestine world, imposing one that is the Western style, understanding Jesus Christ, understanding what he represents. But I think that we should make this kind of exercise of creating a respectful dialogue. For example, recently in Colombia, in Santa Marta, we had a meeting with different spiritualities, but it was actually based on how to protect nature and how to, from these spiritual approaches, how to face the challenge of the preservation of the forests, preservation of water, finding productive ways that are non-destructive, facing extractivism, etc. So there are different spiritual ways that are more related to the needs of the concrete material world where we live. And that's where different kinds of spirituality emerge. And it is worthwhile to analyze them, to stimulate them, because it's part of human life. You know, it's very difficult. You always try to have a spiritual knowledge from the point of view of humanity.
If I might intervene here, every culture, every human culture has music, has song, has verse, poetry, literature. And who amongst us would say that when we hear some music, we are analyzing the mathematical connections between each note? We're not. We are responding with our spirit. It is a real material part of humanity. Okay, to be human is to have that spirit. Marx had a profound passion. Passion is just another word for spirit. Same as Lenin, same as Mao. They had passion, okay, for human emancipation, for finding the way for human emancipation. And I think that in the West, what has happened is, especially amongst the left, this discarding of any appreciation of culture as a material fact of human life. And they've let the space open for religion and other movements to appropriate that. But I think it has to be, if we're talking about culture, how can we not talk about spirit? I mean, you know, it's the way that, for example, music or poetry can make you feel sad, can make you feel inspired, can make you feel all kinds of things. This is our spirit responding. So I think it's such an important question that Claudia has posed, and one which really we should have discussed right at the beginning.
Thank you. So any of you would like to give any more input, or would there be any among the audience or among the other panelists? Okay, maybe Claudia, you speak what you want to say so that there can be the interpretation.
Thanks to Firoze, Roman, and Urvashi for your answers. And only say that, what I write was that I have learned from indigenous communities in Mexico that is necessary, the spirituality, but the spirituality that reconnect with ourselves, with the others, and with the nature. And I think that it's important in this material world that the capitalists have built to have another point of view where we can see the transcendental things of the life that are not the material things. So for me, that's the spirituality. It not have to be with religion or even with God. As Roman said, I think that there are many kinds and we have to be very respectful about it and to learn. This morning, I talk about the importance of the diversity. How can we saw the world in the unity of the diversity? And I think that's something about the culture and of course the spirituality. So thank you so much for your answers. I agree what you do, what you say. Sorry.
Actually, Claudia, being from Mexico, is also quite connected to the Zapatistas. And we've been there to visit the chapels and the places. And she's now mostly working on the solidarity economic networks for not only for Mexico, but also for the globe. So Firoz, please say what you wanted to say, because then we can have the interpretation. Firoz.
Just to add, you know, which of us has not experienced love? And isn't that the most clear manifestation of the spirit? Okay, it can't be reduced to hormones and So this is an expression of spirit at an individual level, but at the collective level, I think it is really powerful. And all the best revolutionaries, I mean, I think about many of the Latin American revolutionaries who've also been very explicit about love being the center. If it's not about love, I don't want to dance, you know?
I'll now give each speaker maybe some 2 minutes or 2 or 3 minutes to maybe say whatever you would like and or to give your final thought. So maybe we could start the other way. So so we will have Roman first. Roman, please.
Thank you, Kinchi. Indeed. My final comment maybe will be based on not only on the dialogue that we are holding today, but also on the Congress that we had in Brazil about community and social medicine. I believe that this debate calls for our own self, our own history, our own wounds, the wounds that we have that are imposed on our bodies, on the one hand, on our life, on our families, on our communities, and also on our territories, because our territories also have the mark, the wound of the different oppressions, economic, political, military, cultural oppressions. So in that sense, understanding that wound and reacting in a positive manner is the way ahead, the path ahead, in my opinion, of course, because it allows us to see other people's wounds and to recognize ourselves in those wounds as well, forging a dialogue, therefore, that can liberate all of us together, free us all. I don't think the liberation of one isolated people is possible, like Palestine, to be liberated without any solidary support from all the rest of the world against imperialism and against Zionism. I don't think it's possible. I don't think Cuba can resist, as they've done after 50 years of occupation, 50 years of economic blockade, financial blockade, commercial, without the solidarity of the rest of the peoples of Latin America and the world. And I don't think China can resist either the imperialist attacks that are coming its way without unity with the rest of the peoples of the global south. Therefore, our wounds, as Galeano said, he was a Latin American writer, our wounds, our veins are still open. So we need to take care of ourselves and to heal collectively in solidarity in order to protect the most democratic part of our cultures so that we will be able to face the challenges of the current world. So that would be my final words to wrap up the dialogue of today. Thank you indeed, Kinchi, and all the colleagues who have shared those beautiful smiles during this exchange.
Thank you. So I'd like to invite Urvashi to give your verse.
Thanks, Kinchi. So I really want to thank you because it's been such a privilege listening to everybody. And, you know, it always surprises me when we speak from our extremely varied experiences, how much resonance and commonality there is, not only in the experiences we bring to the table, but in the wisdom that we carry away and in the learnings that we carry away. So I have found that in listening to all of you, and I do want to thank you. And I wanted to mention to Roman, if I may use that name, that when Claudia asked about spirituality, it was Eduardo Galeano's work that came to my mind. And I was thinking of it in exactly that context, and in the context of the communities in the Northeast that we work with, for whom spirituality of one kind or another is really part of their daily lives. And if they were to move into a future where they try to leave that behind, it would be a very arid and bereft kind of future. So thank you for bringing up Galeano. That was really nice to hear that. And once again, thank you for having me on this panel.
And thank you, Urvashi. It's always our pleasure to meet you and see you. And now I would like to invite Ebrima.
Also, thank you again for making it possible for us to come together. My sense is where the world is going, a lot of things that are not normal we have been pushed to accept as normal, things that we've spent all of our lives fighting, just, injustices have been, right up to racism, it's been taken as something that it is something that one can proclaim, okay? I think we should refuse that. I think the value of these conversations on culture, on green, on sustainability, are about actually, I don't know who framed it that way. It's about reclaiming our humanity. It's about making sure that we establish again once and for all and fight for it, that values matter. And values matter, and values that are, what one can call universal, that are very, very important. I think they matter, and they're worth fighting for. And that there is not only one way of imagining the world. There's not only one way of making sure that economies and policies and so on are framed and organized. That there are other ways that are based on justice, that are based on equity, that are based on much thinner social relations and political relations are possible. They are called different things at different times. I think it's Professor Roman who said, look, there's no other way of calling it but socialism. Whatever the name or the point is about imagining a future and imagining a world and fighting for a world where it's not only about might. It's not only about who can extort, who can force and compel others to, to bow to their wishes, who can watch. There's a song that says the revolution will not be televised. Okay, but we are seeing the genocide being televised right in front of our eyes, and it's got to a point at which a lot of people shamelessly stand in front of everyone and say, well, it's about security, it's about this or that. So I think we should refuse that. We should continue to refuse that. And make sure that we aim towards having a world where everybody has something, is recognized as having something to contribute, and that everybody should expect where reciprocity, fairness, equity, and so on, and justice would be maybe the key words, and that materially there is enough for nobody to go hungry. There's enough for everybody to have, adequate shelter, adequate everything. So I think that is for me, what these sustainability forums are about, just pushing for that world to see the light of the day. And I think it's more important today than ever when everything seems to be coming in the way of that. And I'm confident that, it may take time, but we'll get there. And we are seeing signs of it in different places that give us hope that I think we are on the right track. So once again, thank you for keeping this forum going, and for the energy, time, resources you're investing in making it happen. I like what one of the earlier speakers said, that we've actually be thinking about what the theme for the next one would be. But I think that is maybe the way we should. How do we build upon what has been, discussed and done in this particular forum to take the conversations further, so that one can see a deepening of the engagement, a refining of the maybe approaches, and greater determination in terms of making the movement go forward. So thanks again.
Firoz, maybe you could go ahead, and then Anita can come in after Firoz.
Thank you. And I join the others in congratulating you in organizing this really interesting seminar, and for the contributions that each of you have made. We've talked a lot about the struggle for reclaiming our humanity and the role that culture can play in that. I think one of the words that we could have explored more is the issue of resilience and resistance. I'm conscious of that because we just like yesterday received a manuscript from Gaza, which is entitled "We Are Still Here: An Anthology of Resistance, Grief, and Unshattered Hope from Gaza's university students." I mean, there they are, they're sitting in the rubble. We have pictures of people sitting in this completely destroyed university, the rubble there, and they are continuing to study, they're continuing to write, they're continuing to inspire, and they are continuing to say, "Venceremos, we will not move. This is our land. We will not happen." And these are people who are starving, who are famished, and who are being cruelly tortured by the Zionists and by the US and Europe and so on. So I take great inspiration. I think we all, in all of our experiences, know of resilience and resistance. Finally, one thing that we often forget is to express our gratitude to not only to the organizers, but especially to the interpreters, who always do a magnificent job. So please join me in giving them a hand to express our thanks.
Yes, thanks, Kimchi. I was listening to this discussion and just couldn't help coming in at the point when we are talking about spirituality, because what we are seeing in our country, especially, and even others, how there's mass mobilization, unprecedented mobilization under this marker of spirituality, and which is, the kind of hatred and divisiveness is unthinkable. When I see how young people are getting mobilized in northern India, it's something that we have never seen. Under the umbrella or under the facade of spirituality. And so how do we address that is a major challenge. I don't think certainly we will not be romanticizing it, but how do we address it? Because this is what is causing the kind of, people are ready to kill for their own sensibilities or their, what they feel, their emotions about their spirituality, and they're lynching people because they think someone is eating food which their religion does not allow. I don't think we can go on like that. So we must have a concerted way, a way that we've thought about, a way that people are thinking and working and reflecting on, because we need to go ahead, especially with our younger generation.
Thank you. So, Professor Dai, Professor Dai has always been with the South-South Forums since its very beginning in 2011. And it is the first time we are not together in person because of our the changes in the schedule and the postponement. And so most of us are committed, engaged in other things. So as co-organizer of the South-South Forum, I would like to invite you to say something.
So thank you, Kimchi. Thanks, Jade. Thank you, interpreters. I know every time the organizing work is a very challenging task, but this is the 11th years. We've tried, we've persisted, and all the previous speakers we have we carry our own experience. We share from our different perspectives. And we talk about how we protect our humanity, how we support the social justice, how we could anti slavery in the banner of social justice. What we are trying to preserve. I want to emphasize we are facing another round of the evil. We are facing evil. You must know what the U.S. universities are facing. Who's the enemies? It is very different from previous few decades ago. So a few decades ago was the crime of the scholars. For those who spread communist thoughts, they were in crime. But what about now? What's their crime? Is it because they are disseminating the liberalism? And people told me that AI, they could write very beautiful poems. They could produce films, movies in a very efficient way. And in the context of art and culture, there's a saying that human being could be eliminated. And you know, in Hollywood, the people were in strike because there's not enough job for them, because they are eliminated. Many jobs have been eliminated in the context of artificial intelligence. So here we're talking about the strength of culture. We are talking about the possibility of a cultural resistance. Definitely, we're talking about different cultures, from Aboriginals, from the peasants, from those communities that are under wars. But when we are talking about culture, in the historic process, in this modernization process against slavery, we are talking about a culture that we co-create, we shared. And it's very interesting that in the university that I'm working in, the humanistic sector have been slowly oppressed. Maybe this is a manifestation of this global capitalist system. So the meaning of the culture we are talking about is very important, is self-evident, but we need to keep restating our positions because we are fighting a very strong capitalist, imperialistic, racist structures. And we have to say again, and in this South-South forum, we are South-South forums. We are, so maybe we have to also redefine what is global South, because we are not just coming from global South, and we are also people from different traditions. But we share a commonality that we are yearning for creation. We are yearning for cross-cultural, cross-disciplinary connection. Is our human destiny that connects us. But we are also facing similar struggles, but for different kind of human destiny. There are some people who are kicked out from their homeland. And we know in Gaza, in this warfare, and everyone who are like have dyed their hairs, and those kind of youths that they are in this smart trend maybe they're also losing their job because their job has been replaced by AI. So we are inheritant and the future, but we are also fighting for those marginalized communities. And for those marginalized press culture, we have to participate in this creative force. So I would like to also respond to what Claudia's questions, and also to continue and all of your interventions and responses. And you've shared about Gadiano, who is one of my favorite Latin American authors. And I also want to quote Chekarad. Yeah, please allow me to, it's love who guides a revolutionary. So this is what I want to end my sharing with Chekarad's favorite sentence.
Thank you. But then our moderator, Teng Wei, would you like to say 1 or 2 words before I wrap up?
So my thoughts are also follow the same route as what Professor Dai has mentioned. In this era that is already controlled by the algorithm and data, all cannot be accounted for, cannot be recognized by the machine, cannot be accounted for by the algorithm. For example, spirituality, love, literature, arts, religion, etc. They are being cleared away, and this is vandalized. This is as a professor of liberal arts in university in China, we can deeply feel this. It's some hot topics in the society. It's really scary. So in this kind of situation, we have to reactivate. We have to revisit some pre-capitalism traditions. I myself studied the Latin American literature. So to respond to what Claudia has mentioned, at times like today, for example, Juan Rulfo or Garcia Marquez, they have bring the pre-modernism or pre-colonialism literature, and also the reflection of the on the Western mainstream modernity. So they using this kind of reflect to challenge the Western mainstream culture. So I think this is still very important legacy. And in the end, I want to quote what is very popular among the Chinese youth. It says, like, between making progress and going to the work, I would choose to light up some incense for the ancestors. It feels like it looks like all the youth are giving up. They choose I think they are choosing to self-defense, because now their space is being crushed by the AI. Their space of survival is very limited. So we can say that in the nowadays, this kind of extreme right-wing discourse cannot motivate today's youth anymore. They prefer to go back to where the space where it cannot be rationalized by the machine or by the AI. So in some sense, to bring up the spirituality or love is very important. But also we also have to be careful of what, like Anita has mentioned today, the right wing force, their way of motivate the mass is also using passion. Hatred is also a passion. So it's not that when it is spiritual, then it's passionate, then it's good. So we have to be careful and be able to have the ability to distinguish and criticize, to construct certain rules and to criticize and also to be careful with all the sorts. So I'm very honored to be today's a moderator and also be able to come up with all the comments. So
thank you. The idea of asking Professor Teng Wei to come to be moderator is to have her speak as well. And so thank you. Well, I think Firoz started with reminding us that today is the 80th anniversary of the dropping of the bomb on Nagasaki. And while Anita was here in the forum, she was helping with the drafting of the statement of the All India People's Science Network on it was a few days ago, on the dropping of the bomb on Hiroshima. So I think, of course, this year, we celebrate the ending of the war of fascism through the ending of the Second World War. But then it is so ironic that while in the name of fighting fascism, and the current genocide on Gaza is carried out in the name of defending Semitism. That any criticism about Palestinian, about Israelis' atrocities in Gaza would be named as anti-Semitic, which is in its way, in essence, also so fascist. I must admit that I was quite depressed for some time after every day reading the news and feeling so helpless. And so at the point I felt that I thought I would be going into depression. So then I stopped reading the news for some time and only picked it up maybe after a week or so. And but then later on, just about 2 months ago, I thought I have no right to be depressed. When people are being killed, when people are being are still striving for the last chance of getting a piece of bread, of getting something for their children, of surviving from the shameless genocide. So I think, so the way I try to be of some relevance, of some use, is to try to read some good articles and have them translated into Chinese. So a few days ago, the article that Chris Hedges wrote, that someday everyone will say that they have always been against it. And I think he wrote it so beautifully. At this moment now, everyone would say they had always been against Hitler and fascism, although that is only an excuse about their inactivity, about their complicity. So I feel, and now that article has been published a few days ago. Actually, I've translated quite a few. I've had quite a few of these articles translated, but then it's not easy to get them all published as yet. So we are also testing to see how far we can go into these very, very critical cultural criticisms. Today, I think we see that on the one hand, we are all maybe depressed or angry and furious about the kind of totally shameless atrocities and the kind of they are simply, they do not need to be hypocritic anymore. They don't need any hypocrisy. They just say what they want. So Professor Dai just said, they say we will be against all professors who are for liberalism. But then liberalism means something that they still cannot control. There's something they will still see as a virus. And so they would like to define everything in their own interest. And Trump is the best example. And it is not just Trump himself, it's a whole gang out there with the Wall Street, with the industrial military complex. It's a whole gang out there. And we see the kind of so-called submission of Europe to the US powers, but actually it's not just simply submission, it's also their interest. Their last struggle for the straw to save their colonialist, imperialist status. So I think on the one hand, when we see the totally shameless and moves and talks and actions of the capitalist elites, but then at the same time, we know that this signifies the deep crisis. They are, I think we have to reiterate what Samir Amin has always been saying, that the capitalist system is imploding. And this is imploding in such a way that it is trying to bury everything else and exclude everything that could be its threat, its enemy. But because of that, there is the hope. I think the hope is also to see that they cannot go on as usual. They have to resort to everything in order to try to keep their interests and keep their power. But then that also, because they are also very much in crisis and they know it. And so it is a desperate attempt on their side to still keep control and keep dominance. So that is also where I can see the hope. That is where there are the cracks and the spaces which it would be up to us to try to explore and also to open up more cracks so that the wall will fall. Maybe the wall would look too solid for us to bump into and be dead. But then we know that there are the cracks, and if the cracks are big enough, then the wall will fall on its own weight. So I think, well, of course, today, the one that we miss most in our discussions is Samir, our friend. And it's difficult to imagine that he's been away for already almost 7 years. And but I think we will remember what his words are. He's always saying, audacity, audacity, and more audacity. It is, I think, his legacy, not only in his critical thoughts, but also in the ways he is always fighting until the very last day of his breath. And also to I think one month or so ago, we also celebrated the 100th anniversary of Frantz Fanon's birth. So it's his 100th birthday. So I think what Frantz Fanon said has always been very relevant. So he was saying that, well, if we want to end capitalism, it's not just about class. Race should come first. And when he talks about race, that means the whole project of imperialism, of colonialism that has been continued until today with all the neo-colonialism, neo-imperialism. So I think I think what binds us together, apart from all the friendships and the appreciations of our integrity, I think it is in seeing that we have the common enemy, and so we have the one yes, one no, many yeses, where there may be different alternatives, different ways we fight, all the diversity, but then we know what the enemy is. It is the capitalism with its legacies of the colonialism that is still around, and I think we will still have to follow Samir's words. So be audacious in our fight and still be hopeful in our struggles. And so again, I would like to thank you all. Please do not thank us, because we are really very appreciative that you have taken your time, your very precious time. You are all so busy, but then you have joined this panel and shared with us your wisdoms and your affections. And so I hope that, well, everybody will be well. And of course, without the interpreters, we couldn't have this cross language communication. So our thanks goes to Laura Lafuente and Mercedes Pico. It's so good to hear your voice again. And of course, also to our Chinese interpreters, Huang Xiaomei and Liang Ying, and also several others that have been working for us in the last 2 days. And last but not least, the team. So this year we have the forum in a county in China, in a beautiful place by a river. But then the team has worked actually as hard as ever. So taking care of all the equipment, all the technicalities, all the liaisons. So I thank again the team headed by Xiaohui and Shi Cui, and with the team members Pei Yun, Kelvin, Ting Ting, Lai Sheng, George, Zhuo Yuan, and Alice, and Patrick, and Qin Cheng. So it's a whole team, and full-time or part-time or volunteers, but then it is their friendship and their solidarity that has kept this forum going for all these years. So thank you again, and thank you to everybody who has joined us. So this is a wonderful closing to the forum, and please be prepared for next year, for next forum. And if any of you have any ideas, so we might move to different places, and so that we could meet each other and also engage in deep discussions and interactions. So thank you again, and good night and good day to all of you. Thank you. And Jung-ok, thank you. Jung-ok and Liang Ying, Xiaomei. So, okay. Claudia, yes.